My masterpiece is complete. The ultimate in self-portraits. Oh. 'Tis perfect resemblance.
You know, as I do reviews, I'm learning more and more about them, and one thing I learned from this review is never put a picture of Robert Pattinson in a frame. My missus saw it, and I kid you not, the photo that was in the frame is gone, and I've got a picture of Robert Pattinson sitting on my kitchen bench. It's definitely not worth doing. Don't try that one at home, folks. Fresco, though. Now, in Fresco, players take on the roles of the most renowned fresco painters of the Renaissance. They are hired by the bishop to restore a painting on the ceiling of the cathedral where the bishop is awaiting some visitors. The player with the most victory points at the end of the game will be the master of all fresco painters. Careful planning of your workday is the key to getting victory points, so let's jump right in and have a look at how the game is played.
So here we have the game board set up. We have the cathedral made up of 25 fresco tiles and the bishop pawn in the centre. We have the studio where players will paint portraits to gather income, the workshop where players will mix paints to gain more exotic colours and where all paint pieces are stored, the theatre which will keep track of a player's mood throughout the game, the market where players will get the opportunity to purchase paint pieces needed to restore the cathedral's ceiling, and last but not least we have the hostel, where players will begin their workday by selecting a time to get up in the morning and therefore determining turn order for actions. Players will have in front of them one large screen that hides their money and paint pieces, and a small screen to hide the player's action sheet and 5 apprentices who will be sent to work in different parts of the board. I've set up on the side here the blue player's components that would normally be behind the screens to give you a clearer look at things. For this overview I'll show you a game about halfway through. This way parts of the cathedral have already been restored, players have some victory points scored as a result, and players have had the opportunity to gain some more paints and cash. A fresco game is made up of 2 phases, choosing a time to get up in the morning and adjusting their moods accordingly, and planning and performing actions. The player who gets first choice of what time he gets up in the morning will be the player in the last position on the victory point path. In this example, it's blue, so because blue is in last position, he chooses a time slot in the hostel and places his player piece there. Only one player may occupy one time slot. The other players then select a place to put their pieces in order from second last to first. So red, then yellow. Players will now adjust their moods in the theatre, so blue -3, red +1, and yellow nothing. Mood is quite important. If your mood drops to one of the -1 spaces, you'll be playing with 1 less action. If you get to +1, you'll be performing with +1 action. The money token here is how much players will have to pay at the market for their paints during this turn. So on to phase 2, planning and performing actions. Players now select locations to visit by placing their apprentices on their action sheet behind their small screen. Players can visit a location more than once and will often want to. For example, to recover 2 tiles from the cathedral ceiling, you'd have to place 2 apprentices on the cathedral spaces. For this example though, the blue player will place 1 on each space. All the players now reveal their action sheets simultaneously. Because blue was up earliest in the morning, he'll be performing his action or actions first in each location. So, following the action sheet from left to right, players then go visiting the locations. We first visit the market, where blue can purchase a paint tile for the price indicated by his get up time. So he started at 5, therefore $4 for 1 tile. Blue now takes the paint pieces from the supply and places them behind his screen, and other players will now perform their actions at the market according to the get up time if they have selected this location to visit. The cathedral is next. Blue has 1 purple piece, 1 red piece and 1 blue piece, and decides to restore the number 7 fresco tile here that requires that exact paint combination. He puts the paint pieces back into the supply and has successfully restored that part of the ceiling. He takes the tile and gives himself an amount of victory points equal to the number on the tile. And because that tile was next to the bishop, he also gains an additional 2 points and the bishop moves to the newly restored section. Next is the studio where players will paint portraits for extra cash. Blue gets $3 for each apprentice at the studio. So with only 1 visiting here, he gains $3. The workshop is for mixing paints. Each apprentice here can mix paint up to 2 times. The required paints and the colours they will produce are printed on the inside of the large player's screen. Next is the theatre. For each apprentice here, players will increase their mood by +2. So Blue moves his play piece up 2 on the mood track. The other players will now perform their actions at the theatre according to the get-up time if they have selected this location to visit. And that is the end of a turn. Players will now be awarded $1 for each fresco tile in front of them, new paint pieces will come out at the market, and the player pieces at the hostel are reset. When there are 6 or fewer fresco tiles left, the players flip their action sheets over to side 2, which has now removed the theatre action and allows players to revisit the cathedral again. At the end of this turn, it will be the end of the game. Players at the end of the game will also be able to buy victory points with any leftover cash for $2 per victory point. That's just a basic overview of the basic game. The game does come with 3 expansion modules, which I'll just quickly touch base on. The first module is the portraits. With this module, one apprentice of each player when visiting the studio will be able to take a portrait card. Portrait cards will give benefits like bonus mood, money, and paint, etc. The second is the Bishop's Request. One apprentice of each player when visiting the workshop will be able to fill a request. On the back of the cathedral tiles there are paint splashes, which in the basic game have no effect. With this module you can gain extra victory points, paints and money by collecting fresco tiles and colour matching them to the request tile. You take the request tile and get the associated points. The third module, Special Blend Colours, which adds 2 new colours, pink and brown, which a player can mix at the workshop. This module adds some new cathedral tiles as well, which will get mixed in with the existing ones, but will offer higher victory points than the usual. That concludes the brief overview of the game Fresco, so let's have a look at a few things that stood out to me whilst playing the game. My copy didn't come with the pink and brown pieces for the third module. It's no biggie though, I'm quite confident I'll see them arrive soon, but if they don't I can just make them easily enough. The components are all great. Screens are quite thick, the board is double-sided, you've got one side for 2 to 3 players, one side for 4. The artwork is also really well suited to the theme, and it's a very colourful, vibrant game once set up. Something I thought was really cool is no player can occupy the same spot on the victory point path. The active player decides to move back 1 space or forward 1 space. The 2-player variant includes a dummy player. The rules for 2 players are not in the rulebook but in the supplement booklet. And funnily enough, the supplement booklet says it's a game for 3 to 4 players. Then it carries on to give the rules for the modules and the 2-player variant. The rulebook itself, however, says it's a game for 2 to 4 though. For me, the supplement is more accurate. My copy of Fresco will only ever be used with 3 or 4 players. Personally, I don't like my games to include dummy players.
With dummy players, I often feel like I'm babysitting to a degree, and it prevents me from truly enjoying the experience of the game. So I consider Fresco a 3 to 4 player game, and I have no intentions on playing it with 2. With that said, the game still had a lot to offer me. It has a great theme, some interesting mechanics, it's not a heavy game but not too light, and for me that's usually just right. And a game of this weight class gets played quite a bit by my group and I, as you don't have to invest much of your time. Setup's quite quick, a game won't take much longer than an hour even with the modules, and without them I'd say an hour's probably max. This game is also a great stepping stone. I'd say the base game is just one step up from being a gateway game. I really enjoyed how the victory point path determines the selection of wake up time, and that was a nice mechanic that helped keep the game tight and the winner not being revealed until closer to the end. The expansion modules, I think each one of them adds a nice flavour, but there isn't one of them that I felt was an absolutely must-have in every Fresco game that I play. I enjoy the base game enough as it is, but I do like having the option of mixing things up every now and then just to extend the replay value of the game. My favourite module was the Special Blend Colours. All in all, I've had good fun with Fresco. I think it's a game that we will play often first up in our group just to get things started, and then we'll move on to something heavier. It's a nice light-hearted game. Most importantly, it's a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Castelli Reviews, and I hope to see you all again soon.